Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Anthony Chiang, our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. Anthony, what's up?
What's up, David? How are you?
Pretty good. Little quiet week, as we kept, obviously, the whole month of August can tend to be a little quiet, but
Yeah.
Quiet week here. We got a little thing we're going to do at the second half of the episode. It's all in the spirit of the same idea. Obviously, we've just been talking about Kevin Durant every week, and that's where we got to start again this week. Because there's some minor developments, maybe major. I don't know. It depends how you kind of feel about NBA trade demands and GMs speaking out about trade demands and stuff like that. Definitely, I guess, a dramatic story Monday. So we'll talk about that up at the top in the second half of the episode. And the most of this episode, in the spirit of Heat trade rumor season, we're going to rank the 5 best trades in Heat history. Maybe talk about where a Kevin Durant trade would fit among those all-time trades. There's some good ones we were talking before, and there's a bunch of honorable mentions on there too. But first, let's get to the news from Monday. That is, right, Monday? Yeah, Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Kevin Durant, I guess, meeting with Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, and basically saying it's either me or it's Sean Marks. Not Bobby Marks. Former Nets GM,
poor Bobby
right?
Marks, yeah.
Poor Bobby Marks, but it's honestly very confusing that Sean Marks is the GM of the Nets now when Bobby Marks was he the GM of the Nets? Was that his title?
No, I don't know.
He was in their front office.
Yeah, he was in their front office. He was an exec for a while there.
Right.
When they were in New Jersey.
Yeah, when they were in New Jersey. Anyway, Sean Marks and Steve, friend of the show, Bobby Marks, by the way. It's either Kevin Durant or Sean Marks and Steve Nash. And then Joe Tsai later in the day comes out and basically says, we stand behind our management side of things. We're going to do what's best for the organization, and that is keep those guys. I guess we'll start broad here. Just what did you make of the I'm kind of most interested by Joe Tsai's comments because that's the unusual part of this, right? You don't see an owner or GM or whatever come out and make like statements like that based off of reports very often.
Right.
So what do you make of the latest developments in this Kevin Durant saga?
I mean, it's like you said, there isn't too much new, right? It feels like we're just getting like trickles of new information on the Kevin Durant front. It's been a month and a half since his trade request, and I don't know how much closer we are to a deal, or maybe we're further away actually. Like I feel like when the trade request came out, like we were like, oh my god, it's gonna happen like tomorrow or maybe even today. I remember staying up that night, like the first night of free agency, June 30, when the trade request became public. Like, should I go to sleep? Is it gonna happen now? Is it gonna happen at 2 a.m.? Like, should I wait?
Well, we have had breaking news parts of this at 2 a.m. because that was when Woj said the Celtics are a contender. It was a 2 a.m. report.
Weird. Yeah, so I guess we do have to stay up till 2, 3 a.m. just in case. But I guess the biggest takeaway from this is, I guess now we kind of know why he wants to be traded. Like, I guess he's just not like working for Steve Nash and Sean Marks, right? I think the thinking was that he liked Steve Nash. I think that was his pick for coach, right? It seemed like he had a good relationship.
By all reporting accounts, it was that he kind of handpicked Steve Nash.
So it was kind of surprising, but at least now we know the reason why he wants out, right? Because I guess according to this report, if they fired Steve Nash and Sean Marks, maybe Kevin Durant would stay. It doesn't seem like that would happen. As you referenced, Joe Tsai kind of tweeted his support for the coaching staff and the front office. So it still looks like Kevin Durant probably will be moved, but I don't know when. I guess one of the implications of this type of report is, will the Nets bring Kevin Durant to camp? I mean, yes, will he play? Will he practice? Will he skip camp? That's a question. But if he does practice, if he plays through it, that's going to be pretty awkward with him and Steve Nash after this came out that he does not, he wants him fired, and also Sean Marks as well. So does this create more urgency for Brooklyn to make a deal before camp? Does this reduce some of their leverage? I guess, those are questions I think that you have to ask after this report from Shams came out. But as of when regard to the Heat's chances of getting Kevin Durant, look, what was the line that in the Shams report, I think, and this is what we've talked about for the last month. the Nets have made clear privately that they will take every last asset from a team that trades for Durant. So as long as the Heat aren't including Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler in any offer for Kevin Durant, I just can't see how they could.
Yeah.
The Nets aren't going to settle for an offer headlined by, as talented as he is, Tyler Hero, who was, as of this point, is not an NBA starter. I know it's kind of, he probably deserves to be. Yeah, it's probably deserves to be an NBA starter, but still, like, he was a sixth man last year, and for him to be the headline of a trade offer, I think Tyler Hero is very good. He's 22 years old. He's a good scorer, very talented offensive player, but Brooklyn was going to want more. And it's not like the Heat have 5 or 6 picks either to make their offer better. They only have 2 right now, and they can maybe open up a third, but they don't have a ton of picks. So I just don't see how it happens as long as Bam and Jimmy are off the table, which it seems like has been the case up to this point.
Yeah, the Heat still basically has one path to get Kevin Durant, and that is all the 28 other team or 27, whatever the number is now, that's not on Kevin Durant's list. They basically don't want to call Kevin Durant's bluff and decide they're not part of this bidding war. And then eventually also the Nets get tired of waiting around and trying to convince Kevin Durant to stay. So a lot of breaks need to go in the Heat's favor in that regard. And, odds are still pretty slim. But the longer this drags on, obviously, the better the Heat are kind of in. But again, like, all it takes is the Pelicans or someone, or the Raptors or someone who's not on Kevin Durant's list to say it's worth the risk of trying to get Kevin Durant here and convince him that this is a good spot for him. That's all it takes, basically, to knock the Heat out of this. Because, can they, if it's a Heat Suns bidding war, can the Heat come out on top on the Suns? Yeah, they can. It depends how the Nets feel about Tyler Hero compared to Mikal Bridges, or like
right.
There's comparable assets on both sides of those deals. Whereas if another team pops in, then it becomes a lot harder for the Heat to win. And then again, like, it also takes the Nets basically, if we get to January, saying, all right, we got to do something. We can't just have this guy sitting out games if that's what it comes to. Kind of got to go the other way on this report, though. Like, this makes me feel like. So the weird thing about like you mentioned at the top, the weird thing about this whole trade saga was, like, it kind of didn't make sense why Kevin Durant wanted a trade. Like, I don't know, when the Nets are healthy and get to play a full season, and they have Kyrie and Kevin Durant and, maybe Ben Simmons, like, you can be a title contender. And maybe, like, I don't know where he's going that's better, unless, like you said, maybe the Heat or the Nets, Celtics, whatever. Like, he's trying to get to an upgraded situation, but, like, those situations are all kind of marginally better than the Nets' ideal scenario. Obviously, we did not see anything close to their ideal scenario last year, but the year before, they probably should have won the championship. The fact that now we kind of have a reason, and the reason is, like, again, Sean Marks, who is okay general manager, and Steve Nash, who is an entirely unaccomplished NBA head coach. Like, to me, the fact that, like, Kevin Durant gave an ultimatum, where the ultimatum is basically it's these guys or it's me, whereas before he was just like, I want to get traded, like, no matter what. Like, it kind of feels like it's going in the right direction for the Nets now. That waiting is, like, getting Kevin Durant a little antsy and worried that maybe a trade's not going to come through, and he's got to start saving face a little bit because, I don't think he wants to sit out games. I don't think he is in that Ben Simmons class of guy. I think he knows that, well, one, he also obviously always talks about he's a true hooper, and he's got pretty, whether he wants to talk, even if he wants to pretend he doesn't care about his legacy, he cares about his legacy, and sitting out games is not very good for your legacy. So I don't know. I kind of feel like the longer this is dragging on, the Nets are kind of winning in this stalemate, I think, right now.
Yeah, sure.
Now, again, if he sits out, then they lose, and they got to make a trade or whatever. But for now, I think things are trending in the right direction for the Nets.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he would. And I guess he could, but after this report came out, to go through camp and open the season playing in games, like, for Steve Nash, like, maybe it happens, but that's not going to be great. Like that's the
Yeah.
questions, all the stories around that team is all going to be focused on that. I'm sure Brooklyn doesn't want another season of that, but their teams are going to see if they're willing to wait it out, if they're really going to hold strong to their incredibly high, historically high asking price for him, which is their right. I think Kevin Durant's learning that it's kind of hard to force your way out when you have 4 years left on your contract, right? Like this is unprecedented. We've seen guys, with a year left, 2 years left, but 4 years left on his deal. Like he does have leverage, but he doesn't have as much leverage as James Harden did, or as some of these other guys did, when they're on an expiring contract and teams are at risk of losing them for nothing in the next offseason. So, it's kind of, this is something we've never really seen before. Obviously, a star of Kevin Durant's magnitude and with his contract status. And right now it's kind of unpredictable to know what's going to happen. Like, will a team overpay for him in the next few weeks? Maybe. Will the Celtics say, we want to get this done. We'll throw in more picks. We'll throw in Marcus Smart. Let's get the deal done. Maybe. But if that doesn't happen, yeah, I think we're about to find out, will Kevin Durant really sit out practice? What will Brooklyn be forced to make a trade because they don't want to bring him into camp and deal with all that? Those are questions still, that need to be answered in the next month and a half, because camp it's not right around the corner, but it's not that far away. September 26th, September 27th. So it's soon.
Yeah. Couple things. One, I can't believe how bad of advice Kevin Durant continues to get for his entire NBA career. Like, how did they not think this through at all when they made that trade demand? Like, I don't understand what they were thinking. They had to have not been thinking, I think, basically. And it was an emotional decision is the only explanation I can think of. And I guess number two, I don't know, couldn't you see in a month, a report, Kevin Durant meeting with Sean Marks and Steve Nash to try to
probably,
hash
I could
out.
actually see that. Yeah, I could see that.
And then all of
they're
a sudden,
now on the same page and aligned entering the season.
Exactly. Again, both sides are hoping the other side is going to call their bluff, and
opposing teams too. By the way,
the other side won't call their bluff, and we could get to a point where Kevin Durant is, Kevin Durant. Like I said, he's not going to sit out games. I just don't see it.
Unless Brooklyn doesn't play him, which I don't think they will.
Right.
But they could just say, kind of like the Ben Simmons thing of just stay away from the team for now. It's just too much of a circus. We're going to find a deal for you, but just sit out for now. Was that a possibility? I guess.
The Nets are going to have 3 All-Stars, and none of them are going to play. None are injured. None of them are going to play.
They're just not going to play. It's a weird situation.
And there'll probably be 3 of the 5 starters in the All-Star game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough situation, and I think Kevin Durant. We've said this last episode. I think we brought it up. He probably needs to come up publicly and say something. They're sending out different things to the media, and that's trying to diminish Brooklyn's leverage, and maybe that works. But at some point, I think he really is going to have to either tweet something, which we know he's into Twitter. Or say something publicly to really kind of create even more of a mess. Because right now, Brooklyn is just, okay, we're going to wait it out until a team meets what we want. Yeah, you have no rush. So I really think that is the next big kind of the next big event that will happen in this whole saga. Kevin Durant speaks finally, because he still has not said anything on record the last month and a half.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and do some of the best trades in Heat history. All right, let's wrap things up. Anthony, you made the list, 5 best trades in Heat history. We also talked. Let's do some honorable mentions, I think, at the end.
Yeah, sure.
Because we don't want to spoil it too much. Do you want to count down 5 to 1 or 1 to 5?
Yeah, we can do 5 to 1. All right. Drum roll, anything? You have any sound effects for me? All right, number 5. What do you got? Number 5. The biggest trade, or the largest trade in NBA history. 13-player trade, 5-team deal in 2005, where the Heat got James Posey, they got Jason Williams, they got Antoine Walker, and those 3 players were obviously a big part of the rotation of that that 2006 championship team, the one that brought the first title to, in franchise history. So I think you have to, there wasn't a superstar required, but 3 really important role players for one of the best teams in Heat history. So I think you have to give that one credit. And just for the fact that it was the largest trade in NBA history.
Yeah, bonus
points. Bonus points. Have to give Andy Ellisberg credit for making that work as he does.
Yeah, Heat get definitely 3 of the 4 best guys in that trade. Anton Walker, James Posey, Jason Williams. Eddie Jones goes out in that trade. I guess we could say Eddie Jones' trade was an honorable mention. The Heat acquiring Eddie Jones.
Yeah.
It's an honorable mention on our list. And, I don't know if number 1 on this list is going to surprise people, but this nicely bookmarks our list with the number 1 trade we're going to get to. Because, in some ways, this and our number 1 deal kind of transformed what the Heat. Obviously, Dwayne Wade is probably the single most transformational figure in franchise history. But after that, it's kind of these 2 trades that one of them obviously solidified Miami as a superstar destination. And then this one kind of built up like the mystique of, like you said, Andy Ellsberg. I don't know if anyone was probably saying Andy Ellsberg's name at the time. He's obviously become a much more well-known NBA figure in the last few years. But it built up that Heat, the power that they seemingly always have to fill the rosters through creative maneuvering, whether it's like creative cap juggling or just smart, savvy trades. And there's a couple. We'll talk when we talk honorable mentions. There's some similar trades to this, but obviously this is directly. I don't want to say directly leads to a championship, but directly contributes to a championship. And like you said, biggest trade in NBA history. Still, that's worth some extra points.
Yeah, and we should point out, right, David, that we're not counting sign-in trades in this list.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We forgot to say that at the top. So LeBron does not count.
Yes.
Chris Bosh does not count. Kyle Lowry does not count. Jimmy Butler does not count, although we thought about making an exception because the Heat did not have room to actually sign Jimmy Butler. They had to make that sign-in trade to acquire him, different than the LeBron Bosh ones where they had that cap space, and basically that just let those 2 guys get a little bit more money. The players were incentivized, and so was Cleveland and Toronto. But, we're excluding all sign-in trades in this, or this would be a much more boring list, I think.
I was going to say, the list would be too easy if we were including sign-in trades. Like, it would just be LeBron basically
1, Chris Bosh 2, Jimmy Butler 3.
Yeah, it would basically, I think our number 1 on this list would be the only one that makes the top 5 probably if we include sign-in trades. That's it. So
maybe number 2 also.
Yeah, I guess. That would have number 2 is pretty big. All right, so continuing with the list, number 4. Kind of tough because I think number 4 and 3 are pretty close as far as just meaning to the caliber of player the Heat acquired,
right.
I would say. So number 4, I have Goran Dragic, that trade in 2015 that brought him back from the Suns. The Heat traded Danny Granger, Norris Cole, Sean Williams, Justin Hamilton, and 2 first-round picks. So good trade because Goran was obviously a very productive player for the Heat.
That was I remember that trade happening and being like, because I think wasn't it like a really boring trade deadline that year, and then like that trade happened and like a million other things happened. It was definitely like the kind of biggest story of that trade deadline.
Yeah, and at that point, like they thought they were pairing Goran with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, and if they would have done that, I mean that team could have made a run to the finals, right? If you have a healthy Chris Bosh, but then I think the next day or maybe even later that day, like the news of Chris Bosh's blood clots came out. I think he missed the rest of the season. Played a little bit the following year, but never really was able to play an extended stretch again. So, but still, Goran, probably will have his number retired at some point by the Heat. One of the best point guards in Heat history, maybe the best if you look at the numbers. Was very important on the team that made the finals in 2020. They didn't win a championship, but still like made a really deep run into the playoffs, obviously. So I think Goran deserves some credit. He's number 4. But again, you could argue he'd be number 3, as you're about to say.
Yeah, that's a fun trade, both because of the what if component of it, right?
Yeah.
And just like the meaning of it. It was the Heat, basically, obviously after LeBron leaves, and they're like, what do we do next? This was their move this was the Heat are still, obviously vastly different calibers of players, LeBron James and Goran Dragic, but this was the Heat saying, we're not going anywhere, right? It's like, we're still going to be a contender with these 2 guys from the big 3 left, and we needed the one more star, and Goran can be that. But then obviously it's also like Goran bridges. In some ways, Goran kind of bridges the big three Dwayne Wade era to the Jimmy Butler era, right? Because he is the foundational, one of the foundational pieces that makes Miami an appealing destination to Jimmy Butler. Obviously, they ended up having a great. I don't know if they were close before they got teamed
No,
up
they
here.
weren't. They weren't.
Yeah, but obviously they wound up having a great relationship. Again, like Goran isn't the reason that Jimmy Butler signed here, but Jimmy Butler wanted to go somewhere where he could win, and Goran Dragic, you have a guy like Goran Dragic on your roster that helps, who was not that far removed from an All-Star appearance. Was it the year before or 2 years before? He'd just been an All-Star, so yeah, and then obviously Goran plays a huge role in the run to the bubble finals. So he became a Heat lifer, right? And anytime you acquire a Heat lifer, that's a big deal.
I'm sure when his career ends, he'll be working for the Heat in some capacity or be,
Yeah, he was already going to
Heat guy.
all the time, even though he was like on the Nets.
Yeah, exactly. The next three trades brought back players that have their numbers retired by the organization. Right. So it was pretty straightforward, pretty easy. But number three, and it could be if Goran gets
could be the top four,
retired, it could be the top four. Was the Tim Hardaway trade.
Yep.
In the middle of the 95-96 season. So I think Pat Riley's first season with the Heat makes one of his biggest moves early in his Heat tenure to get Tim Hardaway from the Warriors for Chris Gatling, Bimbo Coles, and Kevin Willis. Obviously, it's self-explanatory.
Bimbo Coles.
Just kind of, I mean, that team never made the finals, right? But Tim Hardaway was iconic. Like when you think of the Heat in the 90s, like you think of one of the guys you think of first is Tim Hardaway. Just his meaning to the franchise, kind of helping put the Heat on the map with those 90s teams that made a, challenge the Bulls a little bit in the Eastern Conference Finals and were just really competitive in the late 90s. That one's a no-brainer. That has to be on this list.
Yeah. The UTEP two-step. Tim Hardaway, one of my favorites, like when I was younger. Just very fun player to watch, and probably was he probably the first Heat guy to make first team All NBA, right? I don't know if Zoe ever did, but for a long time you could make Zoe was probably always like the best player in Heat history until Dwayne Wade showed up, but like Tim Hardaway's peaks were as high as anyone's until Wade and the big three and Shaq, obviously.
Yeah. Number two, connected Tim Hardaway.
Speaking of which,
that has to be that. I mean, you could argue that was maybe one of the most important trade in Heat history, just because Alonzo, yes, Pat kind of created Heat culture, right? But Alonzo was the embodiment of Heat culture in the 90s and kind of giving Riley that player that was an extension of Pat and everything he stood for. Alonzo Mourning for a long time was best player in franchise history. Until Dwayne Wade. Yeah. So I think that one was right before the Tim Hardaway trade. I think it was the same season, but either right before the start of the season or early that season, they acquired Alonzo Mourning from the Charlotte Hornets. And as we all know, Alonzo still works for the team and is still very regular presence around the practice court and games and all that. So again, another no-brainer. Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway. Those teams, when you think of the Heat, big three will always come to mind first, but those late 90s teams, those are fun.
Yeah, he kind of put the Heat on the map. Obviously. So I guess what we should note about this trade, as opposed to the previous one and number 5 and kind of number 4 also, they gave up 2 first-round picks for Goran, is this was like where the other ones were kind of fleecings. This one was, the Heat gave up Glenn Rice in this trade. Glenn Rice. At the time, Glenn Rice had been the best player in franchise history, probably. Right. But obviously, like even bad franchises have one all-star guy who like scores points and stuff. Again, Alonzo made the Heat. Once you are a team that if you play in Miami and you're a team that has had like a run of success, an extended run of success. In the NBA, it kind of puts you on the map, and that's what Alonzo, and obviously Tim Hardaway, but Alonzo is the face of those teams, and like you said, the most important guy, the best player. Obviously, eventually won. He was on the 06 team, so eventually won a championship as a player. And like has never left Miami basically since. So, he's going to be number 2, and I think you could make a case for number 1. I would not. You obviously did not, but just like the meaning to the franchise is pretty big. But number 1 is a no-brainer.
No,
in my
obvious.
opinion.
Well, yes, and I'll ask you a question after I reveal it, but number 1 right now, no-brainer, Shaq. I mean, yes, like he's probably not even the top 5. I don't want to say top 5, the top 3 of best players in franchise history. Like at that point of his career, he wasn't. I think for 1 year he was maybe.
He was runner-up for MVP.
He was runner-up for MVP. Probably should have won it, but like overall, his entire Heat career, like you could argue, obviously Dwayne Wade.
Yeah, it was basically 2 years.
LeBron, but just the fact of a superstar of that magnitude coming to the Heat, like an international superstar, was huge.
He was
to put the
probably, I guess LeBron was like in year 2 at that point. Year 1, like LeBron had barely been in the league.
LeBron was like entering year 3, I think. He was on the same trajectory as Wade. Yeah.
And Shaq and Kobe were the 2 most famous players in the league.
Yeah.
And I think Shaq was probably the most famous player in basketball.
Yeah, I just crossover appeal. Like I think Shaq was probably number 1. And the fact that it helped bring them their first championship, like that's the icing on the cake. What I was going to ask you is, if those teams with Shaq never won a championship, do you think this is still number 1?
That's a good question, because obviously the reason why it's number 1 is Shaq was, the best player in the league 1 year, the second best, really kind of a 1A, 1B for most of that season. Obviously, Wade in the playoffs was on another level, but really a 1A, 1B situation kind of during the championship year. But the other aspect of it is, like I said, it made the Heat a superstar destination, which has obviously been the defining trait of the franchise pretty much since then. Obviously, LeBron and Bosh wanted to come here. Jimmy Butler wanted to come here. Kyle Lowry wanted to come here. Like, God, it has become, part of it is Miami, part of it is Pat Riley, part of it is they win championships. But that all starts with Shaq and turning Miami into a real destination city. Before that, like we said, Tim Hardaway was probably like the most famous kind of guy to come in. Him and Alonzo, like we said. But, Shaq changed the, I mean, you were a kid down here when he came, right? So like I mean, it was, I remember watching Sports Center and you'd see him at the big like pep rallies and stuff. And didn't he join Miami Police Department as like an honorary officer?
Do you
it was the biggest story I mean, obviously it was the Shaq Kobe fallout was huge, and it made Miami the center of the NBA world in a way that
I'd never been before.
Since that moment, they have been, them in Golden State have probably spent the most time being the centers of the NBA world for the last 15 years or 15 plus years since that trade happened.
Yeah, and that moment, like when he got to the arena for his introductory press conference, I believe, when he showed up in an 18-wheeler, came out with like a big water gun and was like spraying the crowd and promised to bring a championship to the Heat, which he obviously followed through on. Just so many memories from that trade that until then, the Heat were very good, like in the late 90s with Zoe and Tim Hardaway, but it just had a different feel with Shaq on the team. And then you had a budding superstar, which I think everybody thought Dwayne Wade would be really good, but we didn't know how good he would actually become at that point. He was entering year 3. That was, to me, no-brainer, I think, number 1. Even if they don't win a championship, I still think that's number 1, just because for what it meant for the franchise at that point and moving forward. So I would still, I think, put Shaq number 1, even without the 2006 title.
Yeah, and we should say also, like the other trade, like that was a good. I mean, obviously, it's never a good trade when you deal Shaq, but the Lakers get back Lamar Odom in that trade, who obviously was a huge part of their championships at the end of the decade. You get Karan Butler, who I don't remember what the trade was to send him to Dallas, but obviously Karan was a very good player.
Karan spent some time with the Lakers, though, right?
He did, and then he went to I guess he went to the
Washington.
Wizards first. I don't know what the how I can't remember how the Wizards got him. Like if the Lakers got something back in that deal, but
yeah,
but it was
the Lakers got
it
the
was
Lakers got back
Kwame.
Kwame Brown. Yeah, that was that trade.
Okay, so that didn't yield them anything that helped their championship run. Well, shout out to Laron Profit, Wizards legend, Maryland legend. But obviously Lamar Odom was a big part of he was the third or fourth best player on their championship teams too. So another deal where it was obviously the Lakers lose because you lose Shaq, but it was like a real trade. Like sometimes when you rank the best trades in franchise history, you just put all the fleecings up there.
That was a good trade.
There were some good ones in here. So yeah. Honorable mention was the Heat getting rid of Shaq also because didn't get that much. They got very washed up Sean Marion back in that deal. I honestly I kind of forgot that Sean Marion played for the Heat. I don't remember anything he did for them. I guess he was part of some really bad teams, right?
Yeah, very forgettable time in history. Yeah.
Was he on the I guess the 08 team that got them the number 2 pick, right? Like he was not around for the good times, but it did spare Heat fans having to watch the really dark days of Shaq when he was playing for the Suns and then the Cavs and the Celtics. So good to get off. They got off Shaq at the right time too.
Yeah, Sean Marion played 58 total games for the Heat over 2 seasons. So was injured for a lot of the time. Obviously, the Heat.
Well, he went to Dallas. Good. He was on the Mavs team that beat the Heat too, right?
Yeah,
so he actually, I guess, was not totally washed up.
No, he just wasn't. He wasn't a lead. Yeah, he wasn't a lead guy. He was at that point a role player. And when he came to the Heat, he still thought he was a lead guy. The Heat used him in that role, and that just wasn't him at that point of his career. Another honorable mention one I think that needs to be mentioned is the trade that brought back Jay Crowder. I mean that was
similar to the number 5 deal I think we have on this list where got role players but kind of a fleecing. The Heat give up Dion in that deal, give up
Justice Winslow,
Johnson, give up Justice Winslow. I remember when that trade happened, kind of people were like, I don't know, it was not thought that the Heat were the clear winners of that deal.
And it was considered the Andre Iguodala trade.
Right, it was considered the Andre Iguodala trade, who had not played at all that year, and it was kind of like, wow, the Grizz got all this for Andre Iguodala, and they just had to throw in Jay Crowder, and then, obviously Justice in a lot of ways was kind of the marquee asset in that deal because at that point, I always think it's funny that season started with game 1 of that year was Justice Winslow putting up a LeBron 27, 7, and 7 on opening night. He was still thought of as a pretty good asset at that point. Obviously, just has had a ton of injuries and stuff to hold him back. But yeah, I mean, obviously Jay Crowder became a little bit of a Heat legend in the bubble run, and Miami fans are still pining for him to come back.
Never know. Maybe it might happen. And don't forget Solomon Hill either. I mean, Solomon Hill.
Yeah, another fan favorite, certainly, right?
And got some minutes in those finals because of injuries, but still played some minutes. Played some minutes in those finals. And yeah, I think obviously it was a good trade for the Heat. Justice Winslow was, that was at that point people were kind of unsure if it would work out because Justice Winslow there's still so many questions about him. But I think looking back, even though it was kind of a 1-year rental for Jay Crowder, it worked out because they made it to the finals. And Jay Crowder was really, really important to that finals run, kind of like the PJ Tucker of this season. And Andre Iguodala, he wasn't maybe it wasn't what everyone expected him to be when the Heat got him, but still a rotation, very an important rotation player for that finals team that year. So can't forget that either. So I think that definitely is probably one of the top honorable mention deals just because of what the success it led to just for that one season.
I searched best trades in Heat history to make sure we didn't miss anything. I found an article from 2011, so obviously missing the Goran and Jay Crowder trade. But number 10, they had the Jermaine O'Neal trade on there, which I don't remember as a great Heat trade, frankly.
Yeah.
They traded away Sean Marion in that deal to Toronto, but
They got Jamar Moon though. Jamar Moon.
Got Jamar Moon. I like Jamar Moon. Always like Jamar Moon.
Jamar Moon was fun. I think I'm looking at the same list you're looking at. It's the first thing that comes up when you Google.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean the Brian Grant one to Miami is Brian Grant had some really good years for the Heat and was
he was part of the Shaq trade, right?
And he was part of the return the Lakers got for Shaq. So yeah, not only did he play well for the Heat and kind of was a fan favorite down here. I remember having his dreadlock wig as a kid, like wearing it to games. But he also helped to get Shaq. So I think that one probably deserves to be an honorable mention as well.
Yeah. So let's say they swing a Kevin Durant deal. Where would you stick that on here?
I think it's very similar to the Shaq trade.
The Shaq trade, yeah.
Because late superstar, one of the best players ever, late in their careers. Obviously, you do the deal with the intent of winning a championship in the next few years while they're still, late in their prime. I would rank it number 2.
Yeah, they got to win
only
championship,
because
right? Like that's the caveat on it.
Yeah, I guess, but I just said that like Shaq.
I know.
But Shaq was different because he was the first one.
It was the first.
I kind of opened the door.
That is when you think of the Miami Heat in the last 20 years or whatever, you think they are in on every free agent, basically. Like everyone wants to come. Ironically, not really free agents because every big Heat move has technically been a trade, but they are in on every superstar who wants to change places. And Shaq, I'm trying to I don't remember the Shaq trade. Obviously, the Lakers at that point kind of like were deciding between Kobe and Shaq, right? They're like, we can't keep both of them. We got to trade one. Was there like before that trade happened, was there like buzz that Shaq wanted to come to Miami, or was it very much a situation where just the Heat had the best offer on the table for the Lakers? Because again, like I said, Caron Butler and Lamar Odom, those were two really. Yeah. Those guys were like I mean, in an alternate universe, watching Dwayne Wade grow up with Caron Butler and Lamar Odom would have been pretty fun.
That team in 2005, or was it 2003, 2004, 2004? Yeah, 2003,
they made
2004.
The playoffs, right? Yeah.
Dwayne's rookie year when they made it to the second round of the playoffs. That was a fun team.
Yeah.
Caron Butler, Eddie Jones, Brian Grant, Rasul Butler, Lamar Odom. Like that was a really fun team. And there were some people that were like, it's not worth it. Like, why are you going to break up this core? A lot of these young guys for Shaq, who's, I don't know how old he was at that point, but, obviously was getting close to the end of his prime. Kind of a similar conversation as you have now, which is like, it's just funny, like that the trade would be so similar if they got Kevin Durant. But yeah, I think the Kevin Durant deal would be definitely up there. If they won a title, number 2, I think for sure. If they don't win a title, probably behind Zoe. Maybe a number 3, just because of the magnitude of star that Kevin Durant is. But again, I think it's going to take a lot for the Heat to swing that deal because, I don't know if Tyler Hero and picks and some role players are going to be enough to get it done.
Yeah. Bam would be your, the Caron and Lamar Odom. Those were 2 big assets. Like Bam's more established at this point in his career than I think either of those 2 were at the time. I don't think either had been an all-star. Honestly, I don't even know if any of those 2 ever became an all-star. Although obviously both were very, very good players. Caron might have been in Washington, and maybe Lamar Odom got in one year with the Lakers just because he was a Laker and they were really good. But Bam would probably be I guess Glenn Rice. Like, would Bam be the best player the Heat ever traded away? It would be him or Glenn Rice, right?
I mean, they traded Shaq, but obviously Shaq was late in his career.
Well, yeah.
I would think, and at that point, it's just, I guess the one difference is the Heat and the Shaq deal. Like they said, Dwayne Wade is off the table, right? Anybody but Dwayne,
right?
But Dwayne was at that point again entering year 2 of his career. He was a budding.
He was something more similar to like, I don't know, like Jamal Murray or something, right? Obviously, those guys have played a little longer. But I don't want he wasn't even necessarily like, was he Anthony? I guess he was Anthony Edwards, basically. It's like that equivalent.
Right. So like the Heat were fine trading some young pieces because they still had their best young player right on the roster. Like now, if you trade Bam and Tyler, then you have Jimmy, but you have 2 guys who are toward the end of their primes. Jimmy's going to be 33 next month. So I think that's a different dynamic in this where you felt better trading away young pieces because you had your best young piece still on the team. Where, if you trade Bam and Tyler, you're really old. You're a really old top end of your roster. So I get why the Heat are where they are and why they feel the way they feel, but not including Jimmy and Bam. We've had this conversation a few times, David. I agree with it. I know you don't necessarily agree with it. Like, you probably would include Bam, but I get why they're not because of that reason. Like, they'd be such an old.
And I get why they're not either. I can't remember what I talked about last week, but the Nationals just traded Juan Soto, and I thought I was going to be watching Juan Soto play for the Nationals for the next 15 years, and that's why the way Heat fans feel about Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, it stinks. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know if anything's gonna happen anytime soon, but it's probably we'll be talking about this for the next month and a half, 2 months. Who knows? Maybe longer.
Yeah. All right. I think we can wrap things up there. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chiang. You're mostly off these days, but popping in every once in a while with some Heat content as news breaks and stuff pops up. And whenever we decide we want to do a podcast. So I don't know. We'll see what next week holds. We'll be back, I think, like every other week, basically, and
probably
news permitting, basically, and until we get a little closer to the season. And like you said, we're not that far. In a month, we'll be like, all right, countdown to the season, basically, right? Countdown to camp. So
once Labor Day comes around, I feel like that's when the countdown really starts.
Yeah, exactly. So we got about a month until then. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. Mostly doing football stuff these days, high school football. Hurricanes all back. Dolphins obviously back, although I've not been out there yet, but I will be making the trip up to Tampa this weekend for their preseason game against the Bucks. You excited about the Hurricanes?
I'm excited about their recruiting class.
Yeah.
I don't know how great they'll be this season. I think they'll be good, but but the recruiting class is what's exciting because they're getting recruits that they haven't gotten in a long time, especially on the offensive line.
Yeah, I got 5 offensive linemen committed already, which is
and they have
they want to add at least one more. So
I'll say, don't they have a 5-star tackle that's projected to pick the Hurricanes?
Yeah.
I mean, this class is exciting for the future of the program. And if they can put more classes like this together in the coming years, Mario Cristobal will be president.
Honestly,
mayor,
I guess. Could run for mayor of Miami tomorrow and
probably, yeah.
You got the Columbus connections there. You got the Cuban aspect to it. You've got University of Miami. He's got his fingers in every kind of key demographic. Obviously, the football, the high school, all the inner city high school football coaches like him. So all those coaches will be stumping for him if he runs for mayor. So he's got.
He just looks like a leader. This looks like a leader too. Has the leadership aura. So.
All right. Thanks as always for listening, and we will talk to you guys a little later on.